It's now been 1 month since Flight 370 was last heard from, and while the cable news coverage has called it breaking news for 30-plus days now, the first real break came at midday Monday in Australia with word that the underwater sounds that vessels are picking up are consistent with the sounds of the emergency beacon on a submerged wide-body jetliner. If this is indeed the wreckage, it is several miles down, and another long process will now begin. But first, the race to confirm a fading sound deep in the ocean. We begin our coverage tonight with NBC's Tom Costello.
It was the Australian ship Ocean Shield pulling a U.S. Navy pinger locator that picked up something that sounds like this. An underwater pinger attached to every plane's flight data and cockpit voice recorders. The ship heard a constant pulse for 2 hours, 20 minutes before losing the signal. When it picked the signal up again, it heard what sounded like two distinct pingers for 13 straight minutes. Search commanders say they could be from the black boxes.
It could take some days before the information is available to establish whether these detections can be confirmed as being from MH370. In very deep oceanic water, nothing happens fast.
The underwater pings were heard along one of two arcs identified by engineers who used the plane's faint satellite connections to map out possible flight paths. The Australian-American team's location is 375 miles north of where the Chinese Navy reported hearing pings on Saturday. Given the distance, experts say it's unlikely they're hearing the same signal. But the Australian-American team is cautiously optimistic.
We'd like to be able to tell the families that we found the location, but until we can reconfirm, we should not be too optimistic.
More than a month since Flight 370 vanished, search teams have only found trash, not a single piece of plane wreckage on the ocean surface. Complicating efforts, that area of the Indian Ocean is nearly 3 miles deep, 14,800 feet. The equivalent would be 14 Eiffel Towers stacked on top of each other. The very limits of where the Navy's unmanned Bluefin 21 submarine can operate to map the ocean floor.
They'll have to then get down with the ROV and photograph the entire debris field and try and isolate those areas where the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder might be located.
If they have heard the actual pingers from the plane's flight data and cockpit voice recorder, experts say it could take several weeks to photograph the wreckage and pinpoint the black boxes. Then a submersible robot with claws would be used for the retrieval. In a best-case scenario, the entire process could take at least a month and maybe even longer. Brian?
Tom Costello in our Washington newsroom tonight. Tom, thanks. It's important to remember there were 239 passengers and crew on board this flight. And for their families, this has been an awful wait. Again tonight, NBC's Katie Tur is in Kuala Lumpur, where the flight originated. Katie, good evening.
Brian, family members of loved ones are trying not to get their hopes up, saying that with each new news briefing, it seems like they're opening up yet another wound, especially when they don't announce that they've found the plane. Most of the Chinese family members who flew here to Malaysia demanding answers from officials have now gone back to Beijing, where today many held a candlelight vigil marking 1 month since the disappearance. Meanwhile, the Malaysian transport official minister said once again that he is hoping for a miracle, a hard thing for many to hear after the prime minister told them to prepare for the worst. But Brian, without concrete evidence that the plane actually crashed, many are saying there's no reason to give up hope that their loved ones are still out there just waiting to be rescued.
Katie Tur in Kuala Lumpur tonight, rounding out our coverage of this downed jetliner. Katie, thanks.